Picture this: a clay disk, no larger than your hand, covered in strange symbols spiraling inward like the whispers of an ancient secret, buried for over 3,000 years beneath the ruins of a Minoan palace. The Phaistos disk was pulled from the earth in 1908, and from the moment it saw daylight, it became one of archaeology's most tantalizing puzzles. Who made it? What does it say? And why, after more than a century of study, does its message remain just out of reach? This isn't just another artifact. It's a riddle wrapped in clay, a code that's defied the brightest minds in linguistics, history, and cryptography. Discovered in the ruins of the Palace of Phaistos on the sun-baked island of Crete, the disk is unlike anything else from the ancient world. Its symbols weren't carved or painted but pressed into the clay with stamps, making it the earliest known example of movable type, a technology that wouldn't reappear for another 3,000 years. But here's the twist: no one knows what those symbols mean. They don't match any known writing system, and despite countless attempts, the disk's message stays locked away, teasing us with the possibility of lost knowledge. What if this little disk holds the key to understanding a forgotten chapter of human history? Some believe it's a religious hymn, others argue it's a royal decree, and a few daring theorists even suggest it could be a message from an advanced civilization lost to time. The debates are fierce, the theories wild, and the mystery only deepens the more we learn. So today, we're diving into the enigma of the Phaistos disk, unraveling its origins, exploring the boldest attempts to crack its code, and asking the haunting question: will we ever truly decipher the secrets it guards? This is a story of obsession, ingenuity, and the relentless human drive to solve the unsolvable, and it all starts with a single, unassuming clay disk. The moment Luigi Pernia brushed the dirt away from that small clay disk in the ruins of Phaistos, history gained a mystery it still hasn't solved. It was the summer of 1908, and Pernia, an Italian archaeologist leading excavations at the ancient Minoan palace, was uncovering layers of a civilization that thrived over 3,000 years earlier. Amid broken pottery and crumbling walls, the disk stood out instantly, not just for its unusual spiral of symbols, but for the way it seemed to whisper of something far older, far stranger than anything else found at the site. Measuring just 16 centimeters across, about the size of a modern dinner plate, the disk was carefully pressed from clay, baked hard by time. But what made it extraordinary were the 241 symbols stamped into its surface, winding in a tight spiral from the edge to the center. Each symbol was crisp, deliberate, created not by hand but with individual stamps, an astonishing glimpse of prehistoric printing, even more puzzling. No other artifact like it has ever been found. No matching tablets, no fragments of similar script, not even a hint of where this strange language might have come from. It was as if the disk had been placed there deliberately, a solitary message meant to outlast its creators. Archaeologists quickly realized this wasn't just another relic. The symbols weren't the familiar linear A or B script used elsewhere in Minoan Crete. They were entirely unique, a mix of human figures, animals, plants, and abstract shapes, arranged in groups that seemed to follow some hidden logic. Was it a prayer, a contract, a story? Without a Rosetta Stone to decode it, the disk offered no easy answers, and its isolation only deepened the intrigue. Why was there only one? If these symbols were part of a writing system, where were the other examples? Unless, of course, this disk wasn't meant to be read at all, but that's a theory for later. For now, the mystery begins with Pernia's discovery, and the moment archaeology realized it was holding a secret it might never crack. To understand the Phaistos disk, we have to step back into the world of the Minoans, a civilization so advanced, so enigmatic that they feel almost out of place in the Bronze Age. Flourishing on Crete between roughly 2000 and 1450 BCE, The Minoans built sprawling palaces with intricate plumbing, vibrant frescoes, and a maritime trade network that stretched across the Mediterranean. They were the first great European civilization, yet much of their story remains locked away, not just in the ruins of their cities but in their undeciphered scripts. Two writing systems from this era taunt historians: Linear A script used for administrative records and Cretan hieroglyphs, an even older system etched into clay seals and tablets. Neither has been fully decoded, leaving gaps in our understanding of Minoan politics, religion, and daily life. And then there's the Phaistos disk, stamped with symbols that don't match anything else from Crete or the wider ancient world. It's as if someone dropped a puzzle piece from a completely different game. The disk's isolation raises haunting questions. Was it an import from a lost culture, a failed experiment in writing, or something more deliberate, a ceremonial object never meant to be read? The Minoans were no strangers to innovation, but movable type wouldn't reappear until the invention of the printing press millennia later. Why would this technology vanish without a trace? Then there's the shadow of catastrophe. Around 1600 BCE, the volcanic island of Thera erupted with a force thought to dwarf even Krakatoa. Tsunamis, ash clouds, and earthquakes ravaged Crete, weakening the Minoans just as Mycenaean rivals grew stronger. Could the disk be a relic of that turbulent time, a last message from a culture on the brink? Or does its mystery run deeper, tying it to the very collapse that erased so much of the Minoan world? One thing is certain: the Phaistos disk refuses to fit neatly into history. It stands apart, a silent witness to a civilization that mastered the sea, art, and architecture, but left their words just out of reach. Turn the Phaistos disk over in your hands, metaphorically speaking, of course, and you're immediately struck by the sheer variety of its symbols. 45 distinct characters march in a tight spiral, each one painstakingly stamped into the clay. Some are instantly recognizable: a helmeted head, a fish, a bird mid-flight, a dagger. Others are more enigmatic: looped chords, flowering stalks, geometric shapes that might represent buildings or shields. It's a visual language that feels almost familiar, like catching fragments of a conversation in a crowd, just loud enough to tease but too faint to fully grasp. The symbols aren't randomly scattered. They're grouped into what appear to be discrete units, separated by short lines, possibly words or phrases. And here's where it gets fascinating. The spiral itself might hold the key to how this message was meant to be read. Some researchers argue it starts at the outer edge and winds inward like a coiled snake. Others insist it's the opposite, a story unfolding from the center outward. Even the direction of the symbols fuels debate. Do they face left, suggesting the language flows right to left like ancient Phoenician? Or do the occasional reversals hint at something more complex, like the alternating lines of baffling writing found in early Greek scripts? Comparing these symbols to other ancient writing systems only deepens the intrigue. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which blend pictograms with phonetic sounds, or Mesopotamian cuneiforms wedge-shaped strokes, the Phaistos symbols resist easy categorization. A few bear passing resemblance to signs from Linear A, the still undeciphered script of the Minoans, but nothing close enough to call a match. Even more puzzling is the disk's singular nature. In Egypt, tombs are littered with hieroglyphs. In Mesopotamia, libraries of cuneiform tablets survive. But this, no duplicates, no fragments, no evolution of the script. It's as if someone invented an entire writing system just for this one object. Take the plumed head symbol, a human figure with a striking feather crown. Some speculate it represents a priest or deity, echoing imagery from Minoan frescoes. The ship symbol might hint at Crete's seafaring prowess, while the bee could point to the island's famed honey cults. Yet without context, these interpretations remain educated guesses. The abstract symbols are even more elusive. Are they numerals, sacred signs, punctuation? Every attempt to assign meaning feels like trying to solve a crossword puzzle with half the clues missing. What makes the Phaistos disk so maddening and so magnetic is that it dances on the edge of comprehension. The symbols are just concrete enough to feel decipherable, yet their arrangement locks away their secrets. It's a linguistic Rubik's Cube challenging us to twist the pieces into place. And with each failed attempt, the disk seems to whisper the same tantalizing question. What if we're not just missing the key but the entire lock? The quest to crack the code of the Phaistos disk reads like a history of human ingenuity and frustration. From the moment it was unearthed, linguists, archaeologists, and even amateur sleuths have thrown everything they've got at this ancient cipher, only to walk away with more questions than answers. Early attempts in the 1920s and 30s leaned heavily on pattern recognition, with scholars counting symbol frequencies and grouping repetitions, hoping to spot the telltale rhythms of a known language. But the disk refused to play by the rules. Unlike Linear B, the script deciphered in the 1950s thanks to Michael Ventris and building on the meticulous grids of Alice Kober, the Phaistos symbols resisted categorization. Kober's groundbreaking work involved cataloging shared endings and prefixes in Linear B tablets, a method that cracked the script structure. Yet when applied to the disk, her techniques hit a wall. Without parallel texts or even a single bilingual inscription, there was no anchor to tether these symbols to meaning. Then came the computers. In the 1970s, teams fed the disk's symbols into early mainframes, hoping algorithms might detect hidden patterns. Decades later, artificial intelligence took its shot, parsing the symbols with neural networks trained on every known ancient language. Still no breakthrough. The problem wasn't processing power, it was context. AI needs vast datasets to find connections, and the Phaistos disk is a linguistic island. Even the most sophisticated models could only guess, spinning theories as speculative as those of their human predecessors. Of course, where academia falters, imagination rushes in. Some theorists insist the disk isn't language at all, it's a musical score, with symbols representing notes or rhythms. Others see an agricultural calendar tracking planting cycles with pictograms of crops and tools. One particularly bold claim suggests it's a geometric puzzle, a Bronze Age board game waiting to be played. And then there's the extraterrestrial angle, a message deliberately left opaque, meant only for those with otherworldly knowledge. What's striking is how each failed attempt adds layers to the mystery. The disk doesn't just defy translation, it defies categorization, slipping through the cracks of every system we've devised. Whether it's a sacred text, a royal inventory, or something entirely other, it challenges our very understanding of how communication evolves. And perhaps that's the point. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to keep us wondering. The breakthrough came in 1952 when a young architect named Michael Ventris stunned the world by cracking Linear B, the ancient script used by the Mycenaean Greeks. For decades, this mysterious writing system had baffled scholars, its symbols etched onto clay tablets across Crete and mainland Greece. Then Ventris, working from home with nothing but index cards and relentless curiosity, proved it was an early form of Greek. Overnight, a 3,000-year-old civilization began speaking to us in its own words, and for those obsessed with the Phaistos disk, hope flared. If Linear B could fall, surely its enigmatic cousin would follow. But history doesn't repeat itself, at least not neatly. Where Linear B had hundreds of tablets to compare, the disk stood alone. Where Linear B's symbols overlapped with later Greek phonetics, the disk's pictographs shared no such lineage. Even the timing was off. Linear B emerged around 1450 BCE, likely adopted by Mycenaean invaders who conquered the Minoans. The Phaistos disk, though its exact date is debated, seems older, possibly by centuries. Its symbols feel more primal, less systematic, as if capturing a language still finding its shape. The differences run deeper than time. Linear B was practical, used for inventories and tax records, dry but decipherable. The disk, with its spiraling symbols and stamped precision, feels ceremonial, maybe even sacred. Some linguists argue its symbols aren't phonetic at all but ideographic, each one representing a whole concept rather than a sound. Imagine trying to read a modern sentence where every word is an emoji, without the internet to explain the shorthand. Ventris Triumph did offer one crucial lesson. Sometimes the key isn't complexity but context. He cracked Linear B by linking its symbols to place names that hadn't changed in millennia. The disk, though, refuses to give up such anchors. No matching text, no bilingual inscriptions, not even a recurring symbol outside Crete. It's as if the Minoans, or whoever made this, took care to leave no Rosetta Stone behind. So while Linear B's decipherment remains a beacon of possibility, it also underscores how singular the disk truly is. One script yielded to patience and logic. The other, it guards its secrets like a temple relic, whispering just enough to keep us chasing shadows. But what if the Phaistos disk isn't ancient at all? In 2008, a bombshell theory sent shockwaves through the archaeological world when Dr. Jerome Eisenberg, a respected antiquities expert, publicly declared the disk a modern fake. His argument hinges on three unsettling points, each calling into question everything we thought we knew about this enigmatic artifact. First, there's the disk's alarming uniqueness. No other artifact from Crete or anywhere in the Bronze Age Mediterranean bears these symbols, this spiral layout, or this peculiar stamped technique. Forgers thrive on such gaps, crafting objects tailored to tantalize precisely because they defy comparison. Eisenberg points to the infamous Piltdown Man hoax, where a fabricated fossil misled scientists for decades by filling a coveted evolutionary missing link. Could the disk be another case of wishful thinking made material? Then there's the suspicious crispness of the symbols. Unlike ancient tablets worn by time, the disk's impressions are strikingly sharp, as if pressed into fresh clay rather than surviving millennia buried in debris. Eisenberg argues this level of preservation defies logic, especially compared to the weathered Linear A and B tablets found nearby. Add the disk's improbable symmetry, its near-perfect circular form, and the artifact starts to feel less like a relic and more like a deliberate provocation. But the most incendiary piece of Eisenberg's theory involves Luigi Pernia himself. The archaeologist was locked in a bitter rivalry with Sir Arthur Evans, the towering figure who excavated Knossos and dominated Minoan studies. Evans had already discovered Linear A and B. What if Pernia, desperate for his own legacy, commissioned a local artisan to create something even more extraordinary? Crete in the early 1900s was a hotbed of artifact smuggling and forgery, with skilled craftsmen replicating antiquities for eager collectors. The timing fits. Pernia unveiled the disk just as Evans' discoveries were stealing the spotlight. Mainstream scholars, however, dismiss Eisenberg's claims as sensationalism. Radiocarbon dating of organic material in the clay places the disk firmly in the 2nd millennium BCE, and microscopic analysis reveals weathering patterns consistent with long-term burial. Critics also note that Pernia, while ambitious, was a meticulous recorder. His excavation diaries lack the telltale gaps or inconsistencies of someone hiding a fraud. Most damningly, no forger in 1908 could have known enough about Minoan culture to invent symbols that loosely align with later discoveries, like the plumed head resembling priestly figures in frescoes unearthed decades after the disk's discovery. The debate exposes a deeper tension in archaeology: how to handle objects that defy explanation. Forgery accusations aren't new. The Vikings, Kensington runestone, and the James ossuary sparked similar firestorms. But the Phaistos disk occupies a unique space, its authenticity defended not by direct proof but by the weight of its mystery. To declare it a fake is to dismiss one of archaeology's greatest puzzles, to accept it as genuine is to admit we may never fully understand it. And perhaps that's the most unsettling possibility of all. Radiocarbon dating might seem like the ultimate truth teller, but when it comes to the Phaistos disk, science has to work around a stubborn limitation: you can't date clay. Unlike organic materials that trap carbon as they form, ceramics bake their history into a stable, unreadable form. That hasn't stopped researchers from piecing together clues, though. In the late 1990s, scientists turned to an ingenious workaround, analyzing microscopic plant fragments lodged in the clay. These tiny time capsules, flecks of chaff or straw mixed in during the disk's creation, still held traces of carbon, and their dates pointed squarely to the Minoan era, somewhere between 1900 and 1700 BC. But the real smoking gun lies in the dirt where the disk was found. Pernia's excavation records place it in a layer of the Phaistos palace alongside pottery and artifacts securely dated to the Middle Minoan period. This wasn't some stray object tossed into later debris. It sat among jugs, seals, and fresco fragments that all sang in harmony with the same chronological tune. Even the palace's destruction layer, a chaotic mix of burned beams and shattered walls, matched the timeline of Crete's upheavals, further anchoring the disk to a world before the thorough eruption rewrote the region's history. Skeptics sometimes point to the disk's pristine symbols as evidence of forgery, but here's what they're missing: ceramics don't weather like stone or metal. Buried in the dry, stable environment of Phaistos ruins, shielded from erosion by collapsed walls, the disk's sharp details aren't suspicious. They're exactly what preservation science predicts. Even the clay itself tells a story. Recent spectrographic analysis matches its composition to local Cretan sources, with mineral signatures aligning perfectly with other authenticated Minoan artifacts. The weight of evidence has forged a rare consensus in archaeology's often fractious world. From the cautious halls of the Heraclean Museum to the high-tech labs of modern universities, the verdict is clear: the Phaistos disk is no modern hoax. It's a genuine Bronze Age artifact, one that refuses to surrender its secrets, but does so from a place of undeniable authenticity, and that only makes its enigma more thrilling. If it's real and we still can't read it, what else might we be missing from the whispers of the ancient world? Perhaps the most haunting theory about the Phaistos disk is that it was never meant to be read at all, at least not in the way we understand writing. Look closely at its symbols and certain images leap out: a stepped altar, branching horns of consecration, a figure with arms raised as if in worship. These aren't just random marks, they're echoes of a sacred visual language we've seen before in Minoan Crete. From the snake-wielding goddess figurines of Knossos to the frescoes of priestesses leaping over bulls, the Minoans communicated their spirituality through powerful, recurring motifs. Could the disk be another thread in that same tapestry? Take the horns of consecration, one of the disk's most striking symbols. These stylized bull horns appear again and again at Minoan religious sites, crowning altars and marking sacred spaces. Bulls themselves were central to Minoan ritual, their sacrifice and veneration woven into ceremonies that may have birthed the myth of the Minotaur. Then there's the stepped altar, a symbol mirroring the tiered platforms found in palace shrines where offerings were laid. Even the plumed head could represent a priest or deity, its feathered crown reminiscent of figures in processional frescoes. Stack these symbols together and a pattern emerges, not a mundane inventory but a hymn stamped in clay, a prayer meant to be seen as much as recited. Compare it to other Minoan ritual objects. The famous snake goddess figurines, bare-breasted, arms outstretched, serpents coiled around their limbs, weren't just art. They were likely conduits for divine presence, used in ceremonies where sight and touch bridged the human and supernatural. The disk's stamped symbols may have served a similar purpose, their physical impressions carrying ritual power. Some scholars suggest it could have been a votive object, pressed into wet clay as an offering, the act of creation itself a form of worship. Or imagine it spinning on a cord during ceremonies, its spiraling symbols whirling into a blur, hypnotic as the ecstatic dances depicted on Minoan frescoes. What if the message isn't linguistic but liturgical? Ancient hymns often followed repetitive, rhythmic structures. Think of Sanskrit mantras or the call and response psalms of the Near East. The disk's grouped symbols might mark refrains or invocations, each stamp a beat in a sacred chant. We know the Minoans had music, lyres and drums appear in their art. Perhaps the disk was a score, its symbols guiding priests through rituals where melody and movement unlocked its meaning. Yet here's the twist: even if the disk is religious, that doesn't necessarily make it decipherable. Sacred texts often guard their secrets deliberately. Think of the cryptic Druid Ogham or the veiled metaphors of the Eleusinian mysteries. Some knowledge wasn't meant for the uninitiated. The Phaistos disk might not be a puzzle to solve but a relic to witness, its true significance known only to those long gone, their voices silent beneath the ash of Thera. And in that silence, the disk remains what it's always been, not just an artifact but an altar itself, where modern curiosity kneels before ancient mystery. What if the Phaistos disk isn't a religious relic or an artistic curiosity, but something far more pragmatic, a political document frozen in clay? Imagine it as a Bronze Age treaty, stamped with the seals of rival kingdoms to mark the end of a war. Or perhaps a law code laying out punishments for theft or disputes over olive harvests. Maybe even a royal proclamation announcing the ascension of a new ruler or the boundaries of their domain. At first glance, the idea seems plausible. After all, ancient civilizations from Mesopotamia to Egypt used writing primarily for administration, to track taxes, record laws, and assert power. Yet the disk stubbornly resists this tidy explanation, and the reasons why reveal just how singular it truly is. Consider the linear B tablets found at Knossos and other Minoan sites. These clay records are brutally practical lists of sheep, inventories of chariot wheels, rations paid to workers. They're the spreadsheet of the Bronze Age, devoid of poetry but rich in mundane detail. If the Phaistos disk served a similar bureaucratic function, why does it look nothing like these records? Linear B tablets are crammed with repeated words and numbers, their symbols arranged in neat grids. The disk, by contrast, feels almost ceremonial in its spiral elegance, its symbols alternating between the literal and the cryptic. There are no tallies, no quantities, none of the telltale repetitions you'd expect in a tax log or trade agreement. Then there's the problem of precedent. Across the ancient world, political documents followed patterns. Hammurabi's code was carved into towering diorite steels for public display. Hittite treaties were duplicated on silver tablets, sent to vassal states as both record and threat. Even the Minoans had their own administrative tools, seal stones pressed into clay nodules to mark ownership. But the Phaistos disk has no parallels, no other stamped decrees, no copies sent to neighboring cities, not even a fragment suggesting this was a common practice. It's as if someone invented an entirely new way to encode power, then abandoned it immediately after. Could it be a one-time experiment, a desperate measure during a crisis, like a treaty hastily drafted after the Thera eruption? Some symbols hint at this possibility. The shield and dagger motifs might represent clans or city-states, their weapons serving as heraldry. The ship could denote naval alliances, while the worker symbol might pledge labor as tribute. But without corroborating texts, these interpretations float in a sea of speculation. The brutal truth is this: if the disk is political, its politics as no other ancient culture practiced it, a message without a context, a law without enforcement, a king's voice echoing alone across 30 centuries. And that's the heart of the mystery. The Minoans were master bureaucrats, their palaces stuffed with records of every jar of oil and bolt of cloth. Why would they bury their most important document in silence? Unless, of course, the disk wasn't meant for mortal eyes at all, but that's another story altogether. Here's a radical thought. what if the Phaistos disk isn't a document at all, but a game board? Picture it laid flat on a table, its spiraling symbols not a message to be read, but spaces to be traversed by ancient players rolling dice or moving tokens. It's a theory that gains traction when you look at other Bronze Age games like Egypt's Senet, a spiritual precursor to backgammon found tucked into tombs alongside pharaohs. Senet's board, marked with 30 squares in 3 neat rows, was more than entertainment. It mirrored the journey of the soul through the afterlife. Could the Minoans have crafted something equally profound, their symbols representing challenges, rewards, or even divine intervention? The parallels are tantalizing. Many ancient games used pictograms. Its squares featured hieroglyphs like the House of Happiness or the House of Water, spaces that could advance or doom a player. The disk symbols, with their mix of animals, tools, and abstract shapes, could serve a similar function. A ship might allow a player to skip ahead, while a dagger could force a retreat. The spiral layout adds another layer of intrigue. Unlike Senet's linear path, the disk's coiled design suggests a cyclical journey, perhaps reflecting the Minoan reverence for labyrinths and sacred cycles. Even the disk's 2 sides, often overlooked in linguistic analyses, could represent alternate playing fields, like the dual boards of the Roman game Ludus Latrincularum. Skeptics pounce on the glaring hole in this theory. If it's a game, where are the others? Senet boards number in the hundreds across Egypt. Even the royal game of from Mesopotamia survives in multiple copies. Why would the Minoans produce only one? Proponents counter with 2 possibilities. First, the disk might be a prototype, an experimental design abandoned when simpler games won favor. Second, it could have been sacred, a ritual object used in ceremonies rather than casual play. After all, Minoan frescoes show acrobats leaping bulls in what were likely religious spectacles. Why not a game imbued with spiritual significance? The lack of dice or tokens isn't a deal breaker either. Many ancient games used perishable materials, pebbles, sticks, or fruit pits that crumbled to dust long ago. Yet the theory's biggest hurdle isn't logistics but psychology. Modern minds crave categories, and the idea of a game feels frivolous compared to the weighty alternatives of religion or politics. But games in the ancient world were anything but trivial. Senet was a gateway to the divine. The Norse Nefertafel mirrored Viking raids. Even chess began as a metaphor for war. If the Phaistos disk is a game, it's one that held meaning we've yet to fathom, a playground for the soul as much as the mind. And that, perhaps, is the most tantalizing prospect of all, that this enigmatic object wasn't meant to be solved but played, its secrets unfolding not in translation but in movement, chance, and the silent laughter of long-lost players. Among the many theories attempting to unravel the Phaistos disk, one of the most poetic suggests it might be a celestial map, an ancient farmer's almanac, or even a priest's guide to the heavens. Picture this: the spiral isn't just a decorative choice but a timeline, winding inward like the turning of seasons, each symbol marking the rise of a star, the planting of crops, or the celebration of sacred festivals. Proponents of this theory point to the disk's rhythmic repetitions, arguing that the grouped symbols could represent lunar cycles or solar events crucial to Minoan agriculture. The plumed head might signify the summer solstice when the sun's crown is highest, while the fish could denote spring rains heralding the fishing season. Even the star symbol, a simple cross, echoes motifs found in later Greek asterisms, hinting at an early attempt to chart the night sky. But astronomy isn't the only contender. Some researchers argue the disk tracks agricultural rites, its symbols acting as a Bronze Age farmer's calendar. The bee might mark honey harvests, vital to Crete's economy, while the tree could signal olive pruning season. The spiral's inward coil could mirror the cyclical nature of planting and harvest, a tangible representation of time's eternal loop. This interpretation gains traction when compared to similar artifacts, like the Neolithic Vinca symbols of the Balkans, abstract marks believed to track seasonal changes, or the later Roman Menologia stone calendars etched with farming tasks. Yet the calendar theory stumbles on two glaring absences: numbers and clear repetition. Unlike Mesopotamian clay tablets that meticulously record days and months with numeral systems, the disk lacks any obvious counting symbols. Its groupings vary in length, defying the predictable patterns of a true calendar. And while agricultural cycles are repetitive, the disk's sequence never quite mirrors itself. No mirrored stanzas or choruses to suggest cyclical timekeeping. Even the spiral's direction is ambiguous. If it's a timeline, does it start at the edge and wind inward, or vice versa? Without a fixed reference point, the theory remains as fluid as the symbols themselves. Perhaps the most damning critique comes from archaeoastronomers, who note that the disk's symbols don't align with any known celestial events of the Minoan era. Unlike the precise solstice markers of Stonehenge or the star-correlated pyramids of Egypt, the disk's imagery is frustratingly vague. The star symbol appears only twice, hardly enough to map constellations, and no symbol cluster corresponds to the predictable rhythms of eclipses or planetary movements. So where does this leave us? The astronomical and agricultural theories capture the imagination, weaving a narrative of the disk as a bridge between earth and sky. But like so many interpretations, they are ultimately speculative, a reminder that the Phaistos disk refuses to be pinned down, even by the grand cycles of the cosmos. It stands as a testament not just to Minoan ingenuity, but to the enduring human desire to find meaning in the patterns of the world, whether they're written in clay or strewn across the heavens. The problem with the Phaistos disk isn't just that we can't read it, it's that we might be staring at a linguistic ghost. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which had Coptic as a living descendant, or Linear B, which was rooted in early Greek, the disk's script appears to be a true isolate, a language with no known relatives, no descendants, no cousins in the vast family tree of human communication. It's as if someone invented an entire writing system from scratch, used it for this one object, then let it vanish without a trace. And that makes decipherment nearly impossible without a bilingual key, a Rosetta Stone that simply doesn't exist. History offers sobering parallels. Take Etruscan, the mysterious language of ancient Italy. Though thousands of inscriptions survive, scholars still struggle to fully understand it. Not because the script is undeciphered, it uses a variant of the Greek alphabet, but because the language itself stands alone. With no living relatives or bilingual texts beyond short funeral inscriptions, Etruscan remains a puzzle of grammar and vocabulary, its rich literature reduced to fragments we can read but barely comprehend. The Phaistos disk could be far worse, a language so isolated that even its sounds and grammar rules are pure conjecture. Then there's Rongo, the enigmatic glyphs of Easter Island. Like the disk, these symbols were stamped or carved in rhythmic sequences, spiraling across wooden tablets. Like the disk, they defy categorization, resisting links to any Polynesian or Pacific script. And like the disk, they might represent a writing system born in isolation, a linguistic experiment snuffed out by time. The tragic irony: by the time Europeans reached Easter Island, the natives who might have read Rongo were already gone, victims of slavery and disease. The tablets became mute relics, their messages frozen in perpetual ambiguity. What makes isolate so maddening is the absence of reference points. When Ventris deciphered Linear B, he had Greek as a linguistic anchor, a known language to tether the unknown script. Even Maya glyphs, once thought indecipherable, yielded to breakthroughs when scholars matched symbols to spoken Mayan dialects still alive today, but with the Phaistos disk. There's nothing to latch onto. No descendant language, no parallel inscriptions, not even a single symbol reused elsewhere in Minoan art. Every attempt to assign phonetic values or grammatical rules is a shot in the dark. built on assumptions that could be fundamentally wrong. Some linguists argue that all writing systems, no matter how unique, borrow patterns from spoken language, repetitions for plurals, prefixes for verbs, or groupings for sentences. Yet the disk's symbols refuse to follow even these universal cues. Their groupings vary in length without obvious rhythm. Some symbols repeat in clusters, like the walking man, appearing 3 times in a row, unlikely for a word but plausible for a chant or tally. Others stand alone, defying categorization as either noun or verb. It's as if the creator deliberately avoided linguistic conventions, crafting a code meant to be seen rather than spoken. And that's the heart of the problem. Without a bilingual text or a living linguistic relative, the Phaistos disk might remain forever silent. Even if we someday crack its symbols, we may never truly read it. Just as modern musicians can play Neolithic bone flutes but will never hear the melodies their makers intended. The disk isn't just a locked door, it's a door with no keyhole waiting for a lockpick that might not exist. Until then, it stands as a monument to humanity's first experiments with symbols and the haunting impermanence of the stories we try to tell. In the quest to decode the Phaistos disk, modern technology has become our most powerful ally, peering beneath the surface of those ancient symbols in ways Pernia could never have imagined. Take computed tomography or CT scanning, which allows researchers to examine the disk layer by layer without touching it. These high-resolution scans revealed something astonishing. The depth and angle of each symbol's impression vary slightly, as if pressed into the clay by separate handheld stamps. That discovery in 2014 wasn't just a technical detail, it was a revelation. For the first time, we could see the literal fingerprints of the disk's creator, the subtle inconsistencies proving these weren't carved marks but individual punches, each one pressed deliberately into the soft clay-like type on a printing press. Imagine the implications. Movable type wouldn't become widespread until Gutenberg's press in the 15th century. Yet here's evidence the Minoans or their neighbors might have stumbled onto a similar idea 3,000 years earlier. The CT scans also showed something even more intriguing. Certain symbols like the shield and plumed head reappear with near-identical depth patterns, suggesting the same physical punch was reused. That hints at a standardized set of tools, perhaps kept in a workshop, ready to stamp messages as needed. If true, it transforms the disk from a one-off curiosity into a potential glimpse of a lost technology, a fleeting innovation that vanished with its creators. Then there's artificial intelligence trained to analyze the disk's symbols with inhuman patience. Unlike human researchers who might subconsciously favor pet theories, AI can coldly dissect repetition patterns, symbol sequences, and spatial relationships. One recent study fed the disk's entire sequence into a machine learning model designed to detect linguistic structures, the kind of repetitions and groupings found in known languages. The results were tantalizing but inconclusive. The AI flagged certain symbol clusters as statistically significant, hinting at possible grammatical rules, but without parallel texts to compare, even algorithms hit a wall. It's like listening to a song in a foreign language. You might catch the rhythm, but without understanding the words, the meaning stays just out of reach. Yet the most provocative tech-driven insight came from materials science. Using spectrographic analysis, researchers examined the clay's microscopic structure, discovering mineral traces unique to specific regions of Crete. Pair that with the stamping technique and a picture emerges. This wasn't some imported oddity but a local invention, crafted by someone with access to both refined tools and the authority to commission them. Whether that person was a king, a priest, or a craftsman pushing the boundaries of their time, we may never know. But the disk endures as a testament to human ingenuity, a message from the past that still dares us to crack its code. Beyond the dusty shelves of academia, the Phaistos disk has slithered into the spotlight of popular culture, its cryptic symbols fueling everything from blockbuster video games to wild conspiracy theories. Take Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where the disk appears as a pivotal artifact tied to the first civilization, a precursor race whose technology blurs the line between history and myth. Ubisoft's designers didn't just slap the disk into the game as set dressing. They wove it into their lore, suggesting it held blueprints for advanced machinery. It's a brilliant narrative choice, really, the disk's real-life indecipherability mirroring the game's themes of lost knowledge and hidden truths. Players don't just find the disk, they chase it through volcanic islands and ancient ruins, a quest that echoes archaeologists' own tireless hunt for answers. Novelists, too, have seized on the disk's mystery. In the Atlantis Code by Charles Brokaw, the artifact becomes a linchpin in a globe-trotting thriller, its symbols hiding clues to the lost city's location. The plot leans hard into the disk's tantalizing gaps. What if those symbols aren't language at all, but a map or a warning? Brokaw isn't alone. Authors from James Rowlands to Clive Cussler have tucked the disk into their stories, each spinning visions of ancient astronauts, drowned civilizations, or secret societies guarding its meaning. These tales thrive because the disk invites speculation. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, whose translation stripped away its mystique, the Phaistos disk remains a blank slate, ripe for projection. Then there are the conspiracy forums, where the disk's symbols are dissected alongside blurry UFO photos and Pentagon press releases. Ancient alien theorists, ever eager to pin humanity's leaps in technology on extraterrestrial visitors, point to the disk's stamped precision as proof of impossible knowledge. How, they ask, could Bronze Age people invent movable type without outside help? Never mind that the Minoans built multi-story palaces with flush toilets while other cultures were still in huts. The disk's isolation makes it irresistible to those who prefer their history dotted with cosmic intervention. What's fascinating isn't just how pop culture bends the disk to its needs, but how those fictional echoes loop back into reality. After Assassin's Creed featured the artifact, online searches for its spiked. Tourists flocked to Crete's Heraclean Museum, pressing guides for the real story. Novel-inspired theories seeped into academic conferences, forcing scholars to debunk Atlantis yarns with patient sighs. The disk's legend grows not in spite of its ambiguity, but because of it. Every game, book, or documentary adds another layer to its mythos, ensuring that even if the actual meaning is someday uncovered, the Phaistos disk will never escape its role as archaeology's ultimate enigma. It's no longer just an artifact, it's a mirror, reflecting our endless desire for stories that outlast the ages. The Phaistos disk isn't alone in its defiance. It's part of an elite club of undeciphered scripts, each one a locked door to a lost world. Take the Voynich manuscript, that cryptic 15th century book filled with bizarre botanical illustrations and a script that curls like smoke. Like the disk, it's a linguistic island, its symbols refusing to match any known alphabet. But where the disk taunts with just 241 characters, the Voynich boasts over 170,000, enough text that statistical analysis should have cracked it long ago. Yet both share the same curse: no bilingual key, no parallel texts, just pages or clay that whisper in a language no modern ear can hear. Then there's Rongorongo, Easter Island's enigmatic glyphs carved into wooden tablets. Discovered in the 19th century, these symbols spiral in alternating directions, a visual rhythm that feels eerily similar to the Phaistos disk's coiled layout. Both scripts emerged from isolated cultures, the Minoans on Crete, the Rapa Nui on their remote Pacific island, and both were stamped or carved with tools rather than written by hand. But here's the cruel twist: by the time Europeans arrived on Easter Island, the last people who might have read Rongorongo were gone, their knowledge erased by slavery and disease. The Phaistos disk at least has the hope of future discovery. Rongorongo is a language buried with its speakers. Far older and even more elusive are the symbols of the Indus Valley civilization, etched onto seals and pottery across ancient Pakistan and India. Flourishing over 4,000 years ago, the Harappans left behind thousands of short inscriptions, some just 5 characters long, but no lengthy texts to reveal their grammar or vocabulary. Like the Minoans, they were master urban planners with grid cities and advanced drainage systems, yet their writing remains a cipher. The parallels to the Phaistos disk are striking. Both scripts appear suddenly in the archaeological record, show no clear evolution from earlier systems, and vanish without descendants. Were they administrative tools, sacred codes, or perhaps experimental notations that never caught on? What unites these scripts isn't just their resistance to decipherment, but the shared heartbreak of their context. The Rosetta Stone worked because it paired Greek with hieroglyphs, giving scholars a foothold. The Phaistos disk, the Voynich, Rongo, and the Indus script have no such leverage. They're time capsules without labels, each one a reminder that writing isn't just about symbols, it's about the living communities that gave them meaning. When those communities fade, their words turn to artifacts, beautiful but silent. Yet there's a tantalizing difference. The Voynich and Rongo are latecomers in the history of writing. Their isolation feels almost accidental. The Phaistos disk and Indus script, though, belong to the Bronze Age, a time when writing itself was still experimenting with form. Could their indecipherability be a feature, not a bug? Perhaps they weren't meant to record mundane transactions, but to encode secrets, sacred knowledge, royal decrees, or even early attempts at encryption. After all, the first known codes emerged not in wartime but in temples where priests guarded rituals from the uninitiated. If that's true, then these scripts aren't failures of understanding but triumphs of concealment. Their silence the whole point. So while scholars keep searching for that eureka moment, the bilingual inscription, the repeating pattern, the Phaistos disk and its enigmatic cousins remind us that some messages weren't meant for everyone. Their conversations cut short, invitations to a party we arrived at too late, and that's what makes them irresistible. Not just the mystery of what they say, but the haunting possibility that we might never know. Archaeology thrives on context. The more pieces of the puzzle we uncover, the clearer the picture becomes. But with the Phaistos disk, we're stuck holding a single, solitary piece. Imagine trying to reconstruct an entire novel from one torn-out page, or a symphony from a single measure of notes. That's the frustration scholars face. No matter how brilliant the mind or advanced the technology, without more disks, more inscriptions, or even fragments of a related script, every attempt to decipher this artifact hits the same wall. Compare this to the Dead Sea Scrolls, where thousands of parchment fragments, some duplicates of the same texts, allowed scholars to cross-reference, verify, and gradually rebuild meaning. Or the Rosetta Stone, whose trilingual inscription became a decoder ring for hieroglyphs precisely because it repeated the same message in known languages. These breakthroughs didn't happen in isolation. They relied on volume, on repetition, on the sheer weight of evidence. The Phaistos disk, by contrast, floats in a void. No duplicates have ever surfaced, no tablets with overlapping symbols, not even a scratched graffiti in the same script. It's as if the language was used once for this single object and then abandoned. This isn't just a problem of quantity, it's about losing the living world that gave the disk meaning. Think of Linear B again. Ventris didn't just crack it because he was a genius. He had hundreds of tablets to work with, each one reinforcing patterns of accounting, trade, and governance. The mundane repetition of words for wheat, olive oil, and chariot wheels became the keys to unlocking the script, but the disk offers no such footholds. Its symbols might as well be stars in a constellation. No one remembers connected in ways that made perfect sense to the Minoans, but now form patterns we can only guess at. Even worse, the disk's physical craftsmanship might be working against us. The very thing that makes it extraordinary, those perfectly stamped symbols, could be obscuring clues. Handwritten scripts like Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform show quirks, mistakes, the personal flourishes of scribes that sometimes reveal how symbols evolved. But stamped symbols are static, frozen in their ideal form, leaving no trail of how they might have been simplified or adapted over time. It's like comparing a printed book to a scribe's manuscript. One hides its history, the other bleeds it onto the page. So where does that leave us, staring at an artifact that's almost mocking in its completeness? Every line is clear, every symbol crisp, yet the message stays just out of reach. Archaeology can reconstruct cities from shards of pottery, trace trade routes from flecks of obsidian, but without more dots to connect, the Phaistos disk remains a closed book. And that's the cruel irony. Sometimes the best preserved artifacts guard their secrets the tightest, not because they're broken, but because they're whole. Hold the Phaistos disk up to the light, and the first thing that strikes you isn't just the symbols, it's the spiral itself, winding like a serpent swallowing its own tail. This isn't a straightforward line of text like the linear B tablets. It's a maze, and scholars have spent over a century arguing about where it even begins. Does the message start at the outer edge, spiraling inward like a tightening noose, or does it burst from the center outward, unfurling like a fern frond? Some researchers insist the direction is obvious, pointing to the way symbols face, their angles subtly leaning toward the outer edge as if guiding the reader inward. Others counter that Minoan art often used centripetal designs, with rituals and dances moving toward a sacred core. Without a single bilingual inscription or a clear starting marker, the debate rages on, turning the disk's very layout into a meta-puzzle. Then there's the question of how to parse the symbols. Those short vertical lines dividing groups of signs suggest discrete units, perhaps words, phrases, or even poetic verses. But are these clusters nouns, verbs, names of gods or kings? Statistical analyzers have tried to crack the code by calculating symbol frequencies, searching for patterns that might hint at grammar. The walking man appears more often than the shield, while the plumed head tends to show up in shorter groups like a title or honorific. One recent computational study noted that certain symbols frequently appear together, forming what linguists call collocations, pairs or triplets that might function like New York or once upon a time in English. Yet without knowing what any symbol actually means, these clusters remain tantalizing dead ends, like overhearing a conversation where you recognize the cadence but none of the words. The most radical theory flips the script entirely. What if the disk isn't meant to be read linearly at all? Some researchers propose it's a baustrophedan text, a writing style that alternates direction with each line, like an ox plowing a field. The Minoans were seafarers accustomed to navigating by stars and winds. Could their writing mirror that back and forth rhythm? Imagine reading the first cluster left to right, the next right to left, the symbols themselves flipping orientation like dancers changing direction. It's a compelling idea, especially given the disk's circular form, but it raises another problem. No other known Minoan script follows this pattern. Linear A and B run consistently left to right, leaving the disk as either a stunning exception or a red herring. Recent imaging technology has added fuel to the fire. High-resolution scans reveal faint indentations between some symbols, almost like punctuation or emphasis marks. One cluster on side A ends with a deeper impression, as if the stamper pressed harder, a deliberate stress, a question, a name shouted into the clay. These subtle details suggest a sophistication that goes beyond mere inventory lists. Yet until another artifact emerges with matching symbols, the disk's linguistic rules remain locked in the realm of speculation. It's as if we've found a single page of sheet music, perfectly preserved, but without knowing whether it's a mournful dirge or a joyous dance. The notes are clear, the song is lost. Could those spiraling symbols on the Phaistos disk be nothing more than ancient eye candy, a Minoan artisan's idea of decorative flair rather than a coded message? At first glance, it's tempting to dismiss the disk as pure ornamentation. After all, Bronze Age Crete brimmed with abstract artistry, from the hypnotic spiral patterns on Camers ware pottery to the swirling floral motifs in Knossos frescoes. These designs weren't mere decoration, they pulsed with symbolic meaning, celebrating nature's cycles in vivid pigments. Seen this way, the disc symbols might resemble an intricate mandala, their arrangement pleasing to the eye rather than the mind. The repeating branch and flower symbols could echo the stylized plants framing Minoan wall paintings, where lilies and papyrus sway in eternal bloom. Even the disc's circular form mirrors the sun discs and sacred roundels found in Minoan shrines, objects meant to be contemplated rather than read. Yet the moment you examine the disc's craftsmanship, this theory unravels. Those symbols weren't sketched freely with a brush but stamped with methodical precision, each impression uniform in depth and spacing. This isn't the hand of an artist lost in creative flow, it's the work of someone following a system. Consider the difference between a scribble and a signature. One expresses mood, the other conveys identity. The disc symbols cluster in deliberate groups, separated by crisp dividing lines that scream intentionality. Even the spiral structure feels calculated, its coils tight and regular as a spring. Nothing in Minoan decorative art matches this level of disciplined patterning. The clincher, those 45 unique symbols, if this were mere ornamentation, why not repeat a handful of pleasing designs like the spirals and rosettes adoring Minoan pottery? Instead, we get a sprawling repertoire of images, daggers, ships, shields, that feel more like vocabulary than decor. Compare it to the Phaistos Palace's famous Prince of the Lilies fresco, where every curving stem serves the composition's harmony. The disc offers no such aesthetic balance. Its symbols jostle like crowded glyphs on a stele. This isn't art imitating life, it's something trying to record it. Still, the question lingers, could the disc bridge both worlds? Some Bronze Age objects fused function and beauty, like Egyptian pectorals inscribed with protective spells yet dazzling as jewelry. Perhaps the disc's symbols held ritual significance, meant to be read not linguistically but spiritually, their visual power channeling divine energy. Yet even this compromise falters when you note the disc's isolation. Sacred objects tend to come in multiples. Think of the countless amulets and votive figurines found at Minoan sites. A lone artifact, however beautiful, hardly sustains a tradition. So we circle back to the central enigma. The disc demands too much rigor to be dismissed as decoration, yet remains too singular to confirm as script. It stands at the crossroads of art and language, a testament to the Minoan genius for blurring boundaries, and to our eternal struggle to categorize what ancient hands left deliberately uncategorized. The legend of Atlantis, Plato's sunken kingdom of marvels and hubris, has haunted imaginations for millennia. But what if this myth wasn't just philosophical allegory? What if it was a distorted memory of a real catastrophe, one that echoes in the ruins of Minoan Crete and the ash-covered streets of Thera? Some theorists draw a startling line between Plato's doomed civilization and the Minoans, whose dazzling palaces and seafaring prowess match his descriptions of Atlantis almost too perfectly. Thera's volcanic eruption around 1600 BC didn't just bury towns, it unleashed tsunamis that may have ravaged Crete, weakening the Minoans just as Plato's Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. And nestled in this shadowy timeline sits the Phaistos disc, its cryptic symbols spiraling like a final plea from a culture on the brink. Could this unassuming clay object be a warning, pressed into permanence before the sky darkened with ash? The idea is undeniably fringe, but it's magnetic. Picture the disc's symbols not as mundane records but as prophetic signs. The wave for the coming deluge, the temple for civilizations soon toppled, the running man for those who fled. Even the spiral itself takes on new meaning, not just a design choice but a representation of cyclical disaster, the inevitable return of catastrophe. Plato's Atlantis fell in a single day and night, much like Thera's eruption reshaped the Aegean in hours. If the Minoans saw the signs, earth tremors, receding waters, might they have encoded their dread into this disk, a message cast forward like a bottle into the sea of time? Archaeologists bristle at the comparison, and for good reason. Atlantis is a moral fable, not a historical document. Thera's eruption predates Plato by over 1,000 years, and no Minoan texts linear included mention impending doom. Yet the allure persists, fueled by eerie overlaps. Plato describes Atlantis as a thalassocracy, a maritime empire with advanced engineering, a mirror of Minoan Crete's naval dominance and palatial plumbing. Thera's frescoes show thriving ports and flotillas, eerily aligned with his account of Atlantis's great harbor. Even the disk's isolation fits the narrative. If it were a last-ditch effort to preserve knowledge, why wouldn't it stand alone, a single survivor of a wider tradition lost to the waves? The theory's power lies in its emotional resonance, not its evidence. We're drawn to stories of civilizations whispering across the ages, of artifacts that defy time to deliver urgent messages. The disk becomes a character in this drama, not just a puzzle but a protagonist, its silence a cliffhanger. But history isn't a thriller, and the disk's true purpose was likely more mundane. Still, the Atlantis connection lingers because it speaks to something deeper, our fear of fragility, of brilliance snuffed out too soon. The Minoans did face collapse, whether from Thera's aftermath or Mycenaean invasions. Their world did vanish beneath layers of ash and myth, and the disk, whether warning or not, endures as a tangible link to that fragility, a reminder that even the mightiest cultures leave behind questions louder than answers. The accusation that the Phaistos disk might be an elaborate hoax isn't just a fringe conspiracy, it's a critique that forces us to confront archaeology's deepest anxieties. Dr. Jerome Eisenberg's forgery theory hinges on three piercing observations that, at first glance, seem to unravel the disk's authenticity. First, the symbols themselves raise red flags. Several, like the shield and dagger, bear a striking resemblance to designs from later Mycenaean art, not the Minoan repertoire of the presumed era. It's as if someone plucked imagery from different periods and mashed them together, creating a stylistic collage that feels just slightly off, like a Renaissance painting with a wristwatch hidden in the background. Then there's the disk's eerie preservation. Unlike linear tablets found in the same ruins, which show the expected wear of millennia, chipped edges, faded strokes, the disk's symbols are crisp, as if stamped yesterday. Even the clay's surface lacks the subtle pitting and erosion typical of objects buried in debris-filled layers. But the most provocative claim centers on Luigi Pernia himself. The early 20th century was a golden age of archaeological one-upmanship, with rival diggers racing to unearth the most sensational finds. Pernia, overshadowed by Sir Arthur Evans's blockbuster discoveries at Knossos, had motive to fabricate something extraordinary. Crete at the time was also a hotspot for artifact forgery, with skilled locals producing ancient relics for eager collectors. Eisenberg suggests Pernia might have commissioned a craftsman to create the disk, drawing loosely on Minoan motifs but blending in foreign elements to ensure it stood out. The timing is suspicious. The disk emerged in 1908, just as Evans's Linear B revelations dominated headlines, and conveniently, no witnesses documented its excavation in situ. Yet these arguments crumble under scientific scrutiny. Recent pigment analysis of the clay's microscopic inclusions, tiny flecks of chaff and straw baked into the disk, dates the organic material squarely to the Minoan period. The excavation records, though sparse by modern standards, place the disk in a secure stratigraphic layer alongside pottery shards and seal stones with well-established provenance. And while Eisenberg dismisses the symbol's preservation as too perfect, ceramics buried in stable, dry environments, like the sealed rooms of Phaistos, often survive with remarkable clarity. Compare it to the famously intact frescoes of Akrotiri on Thera, their colors still vibrant after 3,600 years under volcanic ash. The strongest rebuttal, though, lies in the disk's very strangeness. If Pernia fabricated it, why invent a script with 45 unique symbols instead of copying linear A? Why choose a spiral layout unseen in other Minoan texts? And most damningly, how could a forger in 1908 anticipate symbols that wouldn't be confirmed as authentically Minoan until decades later, like the plumed head, which only gained parallels after frescoes of feather-crowned priests were unearthed in the 1960s? The hoax theory underestimates the disk's most baffling trait, its refusal to conform to any known paradigm, ancient or modern. Forgery thrives on familiarity. The Phaistos disk is utterly, beautifully alien. Today, the Phaistos disk rests under protective glass in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum on Crete, its spiraled symbols bathed in soft museum lighting. Surrounded by Minoan frescoes, golden artifacts, and the silent grandeur of a civilization long gone, it's easy to forget this unassuming clay object is also caught in the quiet tug of war over who owns the past. Unearthed by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia during excavations funded by Italy's archaeological mission to Crete, the disk became part of Italy's collection under early 20th century excavation agreements that granted foreign teams rights to their discoveries. Yet its removal from Cretan soil has never sat well with many Greeks, who view it as an irreplaceable piece of their cultural heritage, a tangible link to the island's ancient Minoan identity. The debate isn't unique to the disk. Archaeology has always been tangled in questions of custody and legacy, from the Parthenon marbles held by the British Museum to the Benin bronzes scattered across European capitals. But the disk's case is subtly different. Unlike treasures looted during colonial conquests, it was excavated legally under the norms of its time, norms that rarely considered how local communities might one day reclaim their history. Modern repatriation efforts often focus on artifacts seized through force or exploitation, but the disk's journey from Cretan earth to Italian ownership followed the rules of 1908. That technical legality doesn't soften the emotional weight for many Cretans, who see it as a symbol of their island's brilliance, spirited away just as Greece was asserting its own national identity after centuries of Ottoman rule. Complicating matters further is the disk's current home in Heracleon. After decades in Italy's National Archaeological Museum of Florence, it was returned to Crete in the 1980s, not as a repatriation gesture but as a long-term loan. For visitors, this distinction might seem like bureaucratic hair-splitting, but it speaks volumes about the delicate dance of cultural diplomacy. Loans allow museums to share treasures without setting legal precedents that could upend collections built under now outdated norms. Yet for locals, seeing the disk behind glass in Heracleon while knowing Italy retains ownership feels like a half measure, a reminder that their heritage is still, in some ways, held at arm's length. The broader conversation about the disk's home mirrors seismic shifts in how we think about archaeological stewardship. The old model, where wealthy nations funded digs in exchange for a share of finds, is increasingly seen as a relic of an inequitable past. Countries like Greece now fiercely protect their cultural property with strict laws banning the export of antiquities. Even the terminology has changed. Where museums once spoke of collecting, they now grapple with terms like restitution and shared heritage. The disk sits at the crossroads of this reckoning, its physical presence in Crete a tacit acknowledgement of its cultural significance to the island, even as its legal status remains rooted in a bygone era. What gets lost in these debates is the disk's own story, not as a political token, but as a bridge between worlds, crafted by Minoan hands, found by Italian scholars, and now cherished by Greek custodians. It embodies the paradox of archaeology itself. The past belongs to everyone and no one, simultaneously universal and deeply local. Perhaps that's the real lesson of the disk's journey. However we resolve questions of ownership, its greatest power lies in reminding us that history isn't just about where objects reside, but how they connect us across time, borders, and the ever-shifting lines of cultural memory. The future of the Phaistos disk's decipherment may seem like a fading hope, but emerging technologies are breathing new life into this ancient enigma. One of the most promising frontiers is high-resolution 3D modeling. Advanced scanners now capture the disk's surface at a microscopic level, revealing subtleties invisible to the naked eye: tool marks, clay grain variations, even the faintest fingerprints of its creator. These digital reconstructions allow researchers to virtually unroll the spiral into a flat sequence, testing reading directions that would be impossible to trace on the physical object. Imagine manipulating the symbols like puzzle pieces, rotating clusters to spot hidden patterns, or aligning them against other undeciphered scripts with a keystroke. It's a far cry from the days of squinting at grainy black and white photos. Then there's the power of the crowd. Online platforms like the Phaistos Disk Challenge harness global curiosity, inviting linguists, mathematicians, and amateur codebreakers to collaborate in real time. This isn't just modern manpower, it's a paradigm shift. The Rosetta Stone was cracked by one genius, but the disk might yield to a chorus of perspectives. Recent crowd-sourced projects have decoded WW2 ciphers and medieval manuscripts by pooling diverse approaches. A historian spots a celestial motif, a cryptographer tests frequency analysis, a poet intuits rhythmic structures. The disk's symbols, resistant to traditional methods, could finally meet their match in this digital hive mind, but the real game-changer might lie in the clay itself. Cutting-edge DNA analysis can now extract genetic traces from ancient ceramics, minute fragments of pollen, bacteria, or even the skin cells of the artisan who handled the wet clay. By mapping these biological signatures, scientists could pinpoint the disk's origin to a specific Cretan workshop or era, narrowing the cultural context. Spectrography goes further, analyzing the clay's elemental makeup to trace it to a single quarry. If the disk's material matches clay tablets from a known Minoan archive, suddenly those undeciphered linear texts become potential cribs for comparison. The odds remain steep. Without a bilingual inscription or a sudden trove of matching artifacts, the disk might never surrender its message fully. Yet history reminds us that breakthroughs often come from oblique angles: a child's scribble in a tomb, a merchant's receipt reused as mummy wrappings. The disk's answer could be lurking in plain sight, waiting for the right lens to bring it into focus. Until then, it endures as both a challenge and a gift, a conversation starter across millennia, proving that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved quickly, but to keep us wondering, searching, and reaching for the past. After more than a century of scrutiny, the Phaistos disk remains archaeology's ultimate locked room mystery, a puzzle where every answer seems to lead to 3 new questions. We still don't know who crafted it or why they went to such extraordinary lengths to stamp those symbols with such precision. Was it a sacred hymn pressed into clay to outlast the voices that first chanted it? A king's proclamation meant to echo through the corridors of a palace now dust? Or something far more personal, a love letter, a curse, a last will and testament etched in symbols only a chosen few could understand? The disk refuses to yield its secrets, and that's precisely what makes it unforgettable. Think about it, this isn't some crumbling parchment or faded inscription. It's a physical object small enough to hold in your hands, yet dense with intention. Those spiraling symbols weren't carelessly scratched into the surface. They were chosen, arranged, stamped with purpose, and that's the heart of its magic. The disk isn't just a message from the past, it's a conversation frozen in time, one where we can see the shapes of the words but not hear the voices behind them. It's as if the Minoans left us a key but locked the door somewhere we've yet to find. What lingers isn't just curiosity but a deeper, almost primal fascination. Humans are wired to solve puzzles, to fill in gaps, to reconstruct stories from fragments. The disk taps into that instinct like few other artifacts. It's not merely old, it's alive with possibility. Every generation brings new tools to the challenge, from mid-century punch cards to 21st century AI, and each time the disk absorbs the scrutiny without surrendering its truth. It's a reminder that the past isn't a static thing but a landscape we're forever mapping, revising, and rediscovering. So here's where we stand, a clay disk, 241 symbols, and a mystery that outlasts empires. Whether it's a prayer, a poem, or something beyond our modern categories, its power lies in the questions it asks us, not the answers it withholds. And that's why, after all these years, we're still leaning in, still searching for that spark of recognition, that moment when a symbol, a pattern, a whisper of meaning finally clicks into place. Until then, the disk keeps its secrets and we keep reaching. Now it's your turn. What do you see when you look at those spiraling symbols? A calendar, a game, a message from Atlantis? Drop your wildest theories in the comments, because if there's one thing the Phaistos disk teaches us, it's that every perspective brings us closer to the heart of the mystery. Here's a thought: what if you could hold the Phaistos disk in your own hands, not just as a museum image on a screen, but as a tangible piece of history you've brought to life yourself? Thanks to modern technology and a little creativity, that's now possible. Imagine firing up a 3D printer and watching the disk spirals materialize layer by layer, or rolling out fresh clay and pressing homemade stamps into its surface, replicating those enigmatic symbols just as the Minoans might have done over 3,000 years ago. This isn't just a craft project, it's a bridge across millennia, a way to connect with the past in a way textbooks simply can't match. Educators are already jumping on the idea. History teachers from Crete to California are using 3D printed replicas to turn lessons on ancient civilizations into immersive experiences. Picture a classroom where students don't just read about the Minoans, they handle their own clay discs, carving symbols with handmade stamps modeled after the originals. Suddenly, the abstract becomes visceral. That plumed head isn't just a doodle, it's a deliberate mark pressed with the same care a Minoan artisan might have used. These kits often include guides to the symbol's most popular interpretations, inviting students to debate whether they're looking at a prayer, a treaty, or something stranger. It's history as a collaborative puzzle, one where every theory sparks new curiosity. For hobbyists and history buffs, the challenge goes deeper. Online forums buzz with enthusiasts sharing their replica techniques, from laser-scanned accuracy to artistic reinterpretations. Some stick religiously to the known symbols, while others speculate about missing characters, imagining what undiscovered stamps might have looked like. There's even a niche community dedicated to writing new messages in the disk script, crafting birthday wishes or poetry in a tongue no one truly understands. It's part creative experiment, part scholarly play, and entirely addictive. But the real magic happens when replicas collide with cutting-edge research. Citizen scientists are uploading 3D models of their disks to collaborative platforms, where algorithms analyze variations in symbol depth and spacing, hunting for patterns human eyes might miss. A student's clay stamp might reveal how much pressure it took to create the original impressions, offering clues about the tools used. A 3D printed replica could help test theories about the spiral's reading direction by simulating wear patterns over time. Every handmade disk becomes a data point, a tiny contribution to a mystery much bigger than itself. So why not give it a try? Whether you're a teacher looking to ignite curiosity, a maker eager to test ancient techniques, or just someone who loves a good puzzle, crafting your own Phaistos disk is a chance to touch history literally. Share your creations online, tag them with #PhaistosChallenge, and see how your interpretation stacks up against others. Who knows, the next breakthrough might not come from a lab or a library, but from your kitchen table, where a lump of clay and a curious mind meet. After all, the Minoans didn't just leave us a riddle, they left an invitation.